buying into this idea. You know, there's a whole discussion about how do you do it, but I think he's buying into the idea of creative downsizing. I think that's wonderful because Dave Bing is a mature businessman. He could easily bring baggage of the past onto the table, and which I think is encumbering the actions of City Hall right now regarding the Kobo deal and other things. But Dave Bing so far has not done that, and he's really looking at it with clear, objective eyes and saying we need to do this. And if that message gets out to the community, I think there'll be more cooperation at the grassroots level to say, folks, we've got to pack up and redefine our neighborhoods.
You know, I think, Derek, though, what you're talking about is not creative downsizing, but the luring of development into the city, or luring of development into any place, which is very different than creative downsizing. That is planning for the fact that development is not coming into the city. So there's two things going on here. There's the desire to improve what has already been built. You know, the fact that we have an urban structure both in Detroit and surrounding Detroit, Ann Arbor, Flint, and many cities around the country, and all those cities are sort of competing for the same dollars, the same people, you know. And so one question is, how does Detroit compete and get more of those people to move into the city to regenerate what is there,
while downsizing too.
While
right?
downsizing at the same time.
Right.
It seems to be an incredible conflict, which
Yeah.
it is an incredible conflict. How do you do that? And I think, you know, like Ray says, is we're in a very flexible time. We're in a time that is very dynamic and very exciting, and we don't quite know which way we're going with it. The loss of population is directly related to the loss of jobs in the area. And if we didn't lose population, we'd have a lot more people out of work, right? It's because we don't have the jobs. So it's natural that we're losing population. But as we lose population, how do we make sure that that doesn't degrade the quality of life of the people that are already here? And so
And staying there too.
and staying here, are willing and committed to keep making this area, the Detroit area, work. And I think that the important issue here is not to understand that that's a natural thing, that it's natural that jobs will flow wherever they need to go to find work. But
I actually had a similar experience that Derek had with a developer from California as well, who sort of caught sight of Detroit and was attracted to all the properties and fine buildings that are available. And he came in with a lot of optimism and hubris, and I sort of painted the best kind of political picture I could about the history and legacy of sort of business enterprise in the city, and he kind of shook that off and proceeded, and then within a year's time he was seriously discouraged, and he pulled out of his development deal, and he said until the city can get over its political baggage and think about cooperation more with enabled business entities who are interested in putting their money in the city, very little is going to happen. Right?
well, in the 1970s, in the early 1970s, New York City was pretty much bankrupt. Businesses were moving out of the city at a staggering rate. And when Ed Koch was elected, his mandate and his desire was to bring in as many people from the outside, as many businesses from the outside. And he created a huge tax incentive program to bring in businesses from the outside. And that set the stage for New York's resurgence in the 1980s. Without those tax incentives, New York wouldn't be where it is today. And
So that was done in a fairly short time.
that was done in
10 years or so,
in
right?
a fairly short time. And if you look at the prosperity of Detroit, you'll notice that it's not that long of a period of time. Detroit became incredibly prosperous in the early 20th century, 1920, and it started to become less prosperous at the end of the 60s. This is only 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years in which Detroit was a mega industrial complex. And starts. So things can happen very quickly, and they can happen quickly to the positive, and they can happen quickly to the negative, depending on how much energy and how much creativity a community has.
I think an even more recent example is Washington, D.C. I mean, 15 years ago, Washington, D.C. was a desolate, boarded up place, and it wasn't a place that people wanted to visit. It was extremely dangerous in most parts of the downtown, and today it's considered one of the primary, or premier, I should say, urban downtowns in the entire country. And some of that had to do with the fact that it has one of the best public transit systems in the country, but I think a majority of it had to do with the strategic way of reinvesting in neighborhoods so that they could attract businesses that they needed to, and they could guide people that were visiting around successfully without making them feel at risk. And so from all different perspectives, they figured out the right algorithm that made it, hum. And,
With the right political leadership too, right?
yeah. And
Government money.
And one thing I want to get back to, the attracting of development into the city is one thing. I think part of creative downsizing, something that I've been very interested in and have done a lot of research, and I have actually done some myself, is deconstruction, which is carefully taking buildings down piece by piece and then reusing the parts. That's another thing where in the past year I've tried extremely hard to get deconstruction as standard practice in the city of Detroit, and it's a really difficult uphill battle because there's we have demolition contractors that are used to doing things the way that they always do them. The city, they see a contract the way that they always want to see. I mean, demolition is written into their language of when we have a blighted building, we demolish it. And one of the big opportunities here, though, is that with deconstruction, not only do you require more people in the process of taking down a building, but then you have the potential of creating an entire industry once you take the building down, whether it's furniture, whether it's finished material for the inside of your home. It could even be things like structural material. But it takes the innovation, and then it takes the foresight to be able to push something like that. And we have some of the pieces. We actually have all the pieces in the city of Detroit. It's just about making it work in the political system, because they're the ones that take ownership of the majority of the property.